Supreme Leader Kylo Ren versus Challenge Tier Rancor. Don't worry, I'm going to give some of you what you want to see right away. I have tons of information to share with you from my past several months of testing and optimizing. First though, let's watch the full run. So hello everyone, welcome to my comprehensive guide on running Supreme Leader Kylo Ren with Watt and Thrawn in Phase 1 of the Challenge Tier Pit Raid. Feels kind of weird to be saying hello 4 minutes into the video, but I know a lot of people that clicked on this video pretty much just want to see the run, so for their sake, I wanted to put it up front. However, It is not my intention with this video to merely show you the run and say, good luck, figure it out. but rather to take a deep dive into all of the mechanics at play behind it, making it work. In optimizing this run, my goal was to take full advantage of Supreme Leader Kylo Ren's damage potential while maintaining a reasonable degree of consistency. So, with that in mind, let's start off by talking about the general principles of the run. The first and most important principle of this run is to minimize feeding turn meter with swarms and multi-hits. Think carefully when you have to feed extra turn meter. This principle is a constant through the entire run. My turn order in modding is mostly geared specifically around managing this principle. Every time there's a Supreme Leader Kylo basic, a Hux swarm, or a Thrawn fracture, it is a carefully calculated decision. This principle also guides when we choose to attack the side pigs and when we choose to leave the side pigs alone to divert hits. Our next principle has everything to do with advantage. Advantage is key. It builds your ult and it keeps you alive. Advantage is the engine that drives the Supreme Leader Kylo team, especially in Challenge Tier Rancor. The guaranteed critical hits means less RNG when you're trying to build your ult charge, and the crit immunity means it's much easier for you to survive. Basically, you want to hit with advantage as much as possible, and you want to get hit with advantage as much as possible. Your team's two main sources of advantage are Supreme Leader Kylo Ren's swipe, which is carefully timed out at key moments to make sure the right toons have advantage, and Kylo Ren Unmasked, who will spread advantage to his First Order allies whenever he's hit. Next, a little more philosophically, find optimal times to use your ult and use these moments as a target. Optimizing a run can seem like a daunting task, but that task becomes much easier when you visualize your run in sections. In my analysis, you'll be able to see my run is broken down into 5 sections, and each one of these sections has been individually optimized. It made the process much easier. And finally, for the sake of sanity and consistency, do not focus on what RNG makes possible, focus on minimizing what RNG can ruin. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but essentially, you want to find a safe, repeatable strategy and then optimize damage into it however you can, rather than going for a hyper-risky strategy and then trying to optimize survivability into that. So with those general principles in mind, we now have to talk about some of the RnG gates that can't quite be eliminated from the run yet. Hux and Thrawn must survive until at least Thrawn's second fracture. Thrawn is the hardest to keep alive. He will not gain advantage when crew is hit like Hux does, and is therefore far more vulnerable to crits. Thankfully though, this is the only RnG gate that will actually end your run. With the other two, you may wish to reset, but the run is still completely possible with them, just with a damage reduction. First thing that can reduce your damage is Hux dying early. Hux must survive to pass SLKR a second swipe after SLKR's final swipe pre-final ult. If not, you can expect 15% damage rather than 18%. Where this is in the run may be slightly confusing, and I want to show you exactly why it has that effect. So we'll take a look at this specifically near the end of the video. And of course, SLKR's final hit can be dodged if you basic. This results in a 4% damage reduction, or about 1.6 million less damage. This RNG can be completely avoided though by poking for a minute damage reduction. The chances of this happening are so small that I always choose to basic at the end anyway. I just wanted to mention it because it will happen to someone, and if it happens to you when you're not expecting it, it can be pretty infuriating. And that's basically the main things at play in this run. Now, we're almost ready for the full run analysis, but before we get to that, there is one final thing we have to go over that is very important. Mods. Yeah, I know. Surprise of the century. Oh man, mods are important in this run. Yeah, we all already knew that. So let's just take a look at what we're working with here. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is obviously our primary focus for modding as the sole damage dealer. To get ahead of the C-Pit damage reduction, you want him to be as fast as manageable, but do your best to maintain a crit damage triangle, offense cross, and a health set. I gave up 7 speed from my fastest possible sets to maintain these, and it ended up resulting in higher damage and, importantly, a more consistent outcome. However, if your fastest mod set is considerably lower, you may have better luck going for pure speed. Hux is our second priority, as his speed should be set in relation to SLKR to influence turn order throughout the run. I will point out key moments to look for when setting Hux speed in the run analysis, but speed aside, you also want to focus on health primaries and a health set to minimize RNG. 2 out of 3 health primaries is still functional, but with more health primaries missing, you open your run up to RNG. Thrawn is our next priority, and he is tricky in terms of modding. As the weakest toon, it is very important to get him a health set and 3 health primaries. Missing just one of these 3 health primaries severely opens up the run to RNG. Even when modded properly, losing Thrawn to random damage will still be one of the most common things that forces you to reset a run. But if you're in a situation where you can grind out attempts, it is still possible with 2 out of 3 health primaries. He needs to be slightly slower than Hux, and there are multiple points throughout the run that you'll want to look at to set his speed properly. Like Hux, these will be pointed out in the run analysis, but the first of these is his first turn. He needs to be fast enough to pass SLKR a turn and still get Fracture off before the Gamorrean Captain takes its first turn in order for this run to work. Sometimes, this actually means slowing Thrawn down so that SLKR has more turn meter to swap when Thrawn's turn comes around. Experiment until you have his speed set just right. Kylo Ren Unmasked is probably the easiest toon to mod, and all he really needs is health. However, secondary to health, his speed needs to be set to influence turn order at a very specific moment midway through the run. Again, this will be pointed out in the analysis. And finally, Wat Tambor. Wat, just like the other support toons, should be modded primarily for speed with a secondary focus on health. However, unlike the other 2 support toons, Wat's base health is high enough that he doesn't have too much issue surviving with only 2 health primaries, so it's okay to give up a third for more speed. Wat's speed is largely inconsequential since he is a non-damaging support, so just mod him as fast as possible for more speed and more dispels. If you can get him fast enough to go directly before the Gamorrean Captain's second turn, as shown in the run, you're in great shape. So you'll need to match this modding almost exactly if you want to replicate this run move for move, especially when it comes to the speed. 2 to 4 speed on Hux or Thrawn the wrong way can completely change the end of the run. We'll take a look at that at the end of the video. However, now it is finally time for a full run analysis. Let's break it down. Wat's priority is to put the tank tech on crew first, then the health pack on Thrawn second. The weapon mod on SLKR is not an immediate priority. SLKR's focus early in the run is to build Siphon and charge ult. Swipe is timed out to give advantage at key moments. Hux's role is mostly to pass extra turns to SLKR and reduce cooldowns. However, on his first turn, we pass to Crew instead. Crew exists mostly to tank and taunt, but also has 2 carefully timed stuns. The first of these happens on his first turn, otherwise, just basic. Thrawn's Fracture is a fantastic way to build ult charge. Pass to SLKR for now to get advantage first. Swipe the stunned pig to spread advantage. The extra mastery from the stun isn't enough to hit boss bonuses sooner, but ends up yielding close to 1% more damage by the end of the run. Now Fracture for 20% ult charge. Thrawn's speed is set carefully to go before the captain while still passing a turn to SLKR first. Once we're through the opening, the main focus is to build ult charge and get as many pokes in as possible to get SLKR's siphon up. This section of the fight is all about balancing landing crits and avoiding turn meter gains to the captain. Here, basic the captain to get 2 crits for ult charge. Then, if you can get your Watt fast enough, use Watt to cleanse the death mark from crew before the captain's next turn. This keeps both side pigs alive for now, so they can be used to divert hits for extra ult charge and less turn meter later. Next, Hux uses his swarm on a side pig. This sacrifices 5% ult charge, but prevents 45% turn meter gain to the captain, so the trade-off is worth it. SLKR then pokes the captain rather than a side pig so that crew can attack the remaining side pig instead. This allows SLKR to then swipe and get 10% ult charge instead of 5 while maintaining the same net turn meter gains to the captain. From here, finally put the weapon mod on SLKR, basic with Hux and Thrawn since they have advantage from the swipe, and then ride it out until SLKR's poke is off cooldown. Again, always basic with crew to keep his taunt up. Finally, with poke back off of cooldown, we're getting ready to enter our first ultimate. This is where turn order is very important because Thrawn and Hux are both ready to pass to SLKR. You want Hux to go first to reset SLKR's cooldowns to get in one last poke before Thrawn passes over and SLKR finally enters his first ultimate. This is the target you're shooting for the entire first half of the run. Activating your first ultimate at this point in the run leaves you just enough time to charge it back up before the end of the run, while also allowing you to build up enough siphon to start stacking reasonable damage. While in ultimate, it's all about SLKR. His 3 turns are going to be poke, poke, and swipe in that order. Every other move is made for the purposes of charging ult. For that reason, we do not fracture with Thrawn here. Thrawn does not have advantage and therefore would not land crits. Additionally, since the captain's turn meter is so low, the fracture would feed him far too much turn meter to be a viable move. Just basic for now. Here though, despite what I just said about turn meter with Thrawn, you do want to swarm with Hux. You need the hits here in order to charge the ult back up fast enough and still get the swarm off of cooldown fast enough to use it one more time in the run. There's also not another place this move lines up in well enough to prevent the turn meter gains, unlike the fracture, which you'll see in a second. Second move from SLKR in the ult. Poke, once again. And finally, the last move of ult, SLKR will swipe here. This is the moment in the run that we start focusing on stacking mastery rather than just building siphon. This move will also give advantage to Thrawn right before his last fracture, so that all 4 hits crit, giving SLKR 20% ult charge. If your Thrawn speed is set properly, he will then immediately be able to fracture, thus avoiding all of the turn meter gain from the 4 hits. And with that, we arrive in the final section of the run, everything that happens between the first ult and the second ult. This section is focused almost entirely on building ult charge back up, but it does have a secondary focus on building up SLKR's mastery and on dealing a little bit of extra damage as well. Also, from this point, it is now okay for Thrawn to die. It may make it slightly more difficult to survive at the end, but the run is still very possible without him from here. First, attack a side pig with Hux. Then, we arrive at the point you want to set your crew speed to. It might take a few tries since it's a midpoint, but you want crew to go before SLKR here, so that he can stun a side pig for SLKR to swipe for double mastery. Don't be afraid to slow down crew significantly to make this happen if necessary, but keep his health as high as possible. Also keep in mind that small changes can make a big difference here since the speed changes will compound with the number of turns crew has taken to this point. Then, as stated, SLKR goes next and swipes on the stunned pig. His mastery is now ramped up significantly. If your Hux survives to this point, you're in excellent shape, because right here it's important for Hux to pass another turn to SLKR and reset his cooldowns for another swipe. Getting this extra swipe in is the difference between 15% and 18% in a run. This move is also a crucial speed check for Hux. If your Hux is too slow, SLKR will go first. This may initially seem like a good thing, but it actually ends up opening up your run to way more RNG and will end up killing a lot of runs that otherwise would have worked. Make sure to only basic with Watt and Crew. Crew needs to keep his taunt up, and he's going to need all that healing from Watt to survive the next hit. And finally, once you reach this point, the run is essentially over. There's no RNG remaining, random dodges aside. However, how you play depends on your team's turn meter and who's still alive. We're set up here so that Thrawn will be able to pass a turn and Hux will be able to swarm, so charging ult will not be a concern. Because of this, we can poke with SLKR for a little extra siphon and save 5% turn meter feed to the boss. If we basicked, the captain would be able to go before Hux unless Thrawn passed him a turn. However, by letting Hux gain his turn meter naturally, it puts SLKR at a higher turn meter right after Hux's swarm. This will be important because after the swarm, the Gamorrean captain speed will be so high that he runs circles around SLKR. Getting into ult early and safely is the best way to eliminate RNG at this point. To preserve Hux and SLKR's turn meter as stated, we pass to Crew. This will let Crew cleanse and heal, which is sometimes enough for him to survive 2 hits. In this run, it was not, but Crew getting hit once still spreads advantage to Hux and SLKR, making it much easier for them to survive. And finally, at this point, the run is officially over. Enter ult with SLKR, and then swipe, basic. The moves with the other characters don't matter if there's any left to get a turn at this point, but since my Watt was alive, I used his special for the only time in the run to blow the dots on the Gamorrean captain for a little bit of extra damage. This, however, is insignificant. I do still recommend leaving on airplane mode until the end of the run, because if you choose to basic for your last hit and it gets dodged, you may want to try again. SLKR's mastery is so high at this point that the final basic accounts for nearly 4% of the total damage done through the entire run. I left on airplane mode in this run, and when we shut it off, you can see that we got nearly 7.6 million damage in this run, which equates to about 18.41%. So now that we've seen the way a run should work, I want to go back and show you that specific bit of RNG I mentioned earlier where Hux dies before he can pass Supreme Leader Kylo another turn, and the results of all that. We're going to start this one from Crew's stun in the final segment just to establish timing. So, right after SLKR swipe right here, we'll lose Hux. So, SLKR swipes, Gamorrean captain attacks once, twice, 2 of the 3 hits land on Hux, Hux is gone. This causes problems because now we cannot reset the cooldown on SLKR's swipe. And not only do we lose the increased mastery from the extra swipe, we now are forced to use our poke instead, which right here causes the Gamorrean captain to cross a new damage threshold that was not part of our run before. Because the Gamorrean captain crosses this damage threshold, on his next attack, we're going to lose Crew at a point that we normally wouldn't as well. Crew goes, Gamorrean captain goes, bye-bye Crew. This run is now very dangerous. However, I think it's important for you to see what you're up against in this RNG, because if your guild is getting late in a run and you just need to get some damage submitted, it's better risking it for this. As you can see, it's still possible for the run to work, but it's going to be 15% instead of 18%. That's the compromise. Next, I want to show the differences for 2 key moments that may seem suboptimal or counter to the initial principles of the run. When to swipe on the stunned pigs, and how to use Thrawn's swap at the end of the run. At these key moments, I make decisions that are counter to instinct, but I've heavily tested them in isolation and they consistently result in higher damage safely. Now realistically, at this point, I could just go Believe me. And if you trust me, great. Thanks. However, I'm not the kind of person that makes claims just asking for blind trust. I like to make claims supported by evidence. So, here it is. At the beginning of the run, I made the decision to swipe on a stunned pig for a little bit of extra mastery. Initially, this move might not make a lot of sense because the beginning of the run is more about building siphon than stacking damage, and that early in the run, the little bit of extra damage may change the pacing of the run by hitting damage thresholds sooner, right? Well, what we're watching right now are 2 runs where I decide to not swipe on the stunned pig. Turns out, it actually doesn't change any of the pacing. While it is technically slightly higher mastery and thus more damage early, the slight mastery increase still maintains the same turn order and hits thresholds at the same time. However, by the end of the run, it ends up adding up to 1 to 1.5% more damage. Both runs being shown right now were identical to the analyzed run, but result in far less damage, the only variable being swiping on the stunned pig versus not on the stunned pig in these 2. So, if you can squeeze out a little bit of extra damage and maintain the same pacing, why not? But of course, now that we're talking about swiping on stunned pigs, it kind of begs the question, later in the run, on the second stun, why don't I try to swipe on that pig while I'm in ult? After all, it's just more damage, and at that point in the run, it's all about building damage, right? Well, there's some issues. It turns out that this swipe, if done in ult, actually builds too much damage, and you hit the captain's thresholds too soon. Swiping on the stunned pig at the beginning works because the pacing is maintained. This particular swipe does not maintain pacing. Recharging the ult is delayed a full cycle, and your supporting tunes die way too easy to the captain's higher damage, so there's no opportunity to recharge your ult before the end of the run. However, I am aware of the potential of this move, and I'm keeping an eye on it as we approach Relic 9 and beyond. It is very possible that eventually SLKR may be able to ramp rapidly at this point by using a swipe in ult on a stunned pig and still be able to survive to the end. However, the team needs more survivability first for that to happen, and that does not come until we get relic increases. And now, using Thrawn's swap at the end of the run. For this, I've gone through the trouble of editing 2 runs side by side to more clearly visualize the difference a single variable of who Thrawn swaps to makes. I mentioned during the analysis that you want to swap to crew here, and I know a lot of people's instinct would be to give SLKR an extra turn, hence why I'm showing this. However, while this doesn't cause any security problems at the end of the run, it actually results in lower damage. Essentially, what I want to show here is that SLKR is going to get a hit in before entering ult either way. But if that hit comes from Hux, it also comes with 30% bonus damage. That 30% bonus damage accounts for the entire discrepancy in damage between these 2 runs. They're virtually identical in where they start and the damage they deal on every other hit throughout until the end. Additionally, like mentioned, it preserves SLKR's turn meter to get him into ult a bit faster. Our Kylo on the bottom that received the Thrawn swap barely got into ult on time. With slower mods, he might not make it. So while with my mod setup this is not an issue, for others with slower mods, this may actually end up being an issue of run security as well. And finally, for this whole video, I've been harping on how optimized and important the modding is for this team. Well, now, it's finally time to take a look at that by examining how slightly altering the speed on Hux and Thrawn can drastically change the end of the run. In the top left here, our Hux is 2 speeds slower, which is not ideal, and in the bottom right, our Hux is 2 speed faster, the same modding that we used in the analysis run. This allows for a much safer turn order, Hux going before SLKR at this specific moment. On the surface, it may seem like SLKR getting an extra turn in here before Hux's swap is good, but it's actually very dangerous. It forces the captain below another damage threshold sooner and removes the opportunity for crew to heal before the captain's turn, just like the run we showed where Hux died. This means that if Hux goes first here, you will lose crew. Now at this point, one thing you may have noticed is that in these side-by-sides, the one with suboptimal modding actually scores more. However, this is mainly just because I played the normally modded run slightly differently to match the altered speed run better and minimize variables, since in the slower run, Thrawn can't swap to crew. Crew's dead. That aside though, what you don't see in this footage is how many runs I lost trying to fish for this footage of that modding working. There were a lot of failed runs, and SLKR barely held on in this one. However, even if the top modding could score more, I would still mod for the bottom just because of the number of runs the top modding loses right at the end. To me, the extra 0.1% damage is not worth the extra amount of RNG fishing. Now, for run number 2 here, our Hux is the same speed, but Thrawn's speed is now altered. In the bottom right, Thrawn is 4 speed faster than the analysis run, and in the top left, Thrawn is the same speed as the analysis. This ends up having the same effect because it ends up feeding SLKR turn meter slightly sooner in the run, making him in effect faster than Hux and once again ruining the turn order at this key moment. I don't need to talk over this one all the way because after this, the run is in effect exactly the same as the Hux slower run. But while it's playing, I will take a moment to say that with Relic 9 incoming, there is a chance that this modding and extra survivability may make the top modding possible for a little bit of extra damage, as it's very close currently. Just like with the swipe on the stun pig coming out of the first ult, as new relic levels are released, I intend to continue testing to determine at what point these potential higher damage strategies become viable and consistent. So that's all I have to say about the run, but before I go, I just wanted to talk briefly about what I have planned. There's several videos in the works, but before I started work on any of them, I wanted to get this video done first, because this video has been in the works for several months at this point. One of the main things I do in Galaxy of Heroes is strategic analysis of static game elements, such as raids, territory battles, and farming strategies. My work is accompanied by tons of data and research, so my main productions will take a while to come to fruition. The next big project is one that my guild constantly asks me about, and it's been a pet project for a long time that started just because I wanted to know it. It's a comprehensive overview of the Galaxy of Heroes economy. In that video, I intend to go over the specifics of how all the different currencies relate to each other, how to most efficiently use each currency, and the most efficient farming practices based on that data. In the meantime, while that's in the works, I may release a few lighter videos to fill in the space, maybe even some non-Galaxy of Heroes related stuff. And I'll almost certainly be streaming over on Twitch more frequently than I'm uploading here, link to that down in the description. At least one thing I'm planning on doing is live cam mission coaching during the next Lightside Geo, so if you want to be a part of that, make sure to go over there and hit the follow button. I may even do some coaching of viewers if that's something that people express interest in. So if you've made it all the way to the end here, I hope you found something in my info dump helpful, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit down and listen to me ramble on about CTR. Good luck out there, and may the Force be with you.